On to this conversation now. Former EFF Member of Parliament and human rights activist Khanyisile Litchfield-Tshabalala has officially joined the MK party. She announced her decision during an interview with fellow activist Newzroom on the Moya podcast. The former ANC Umkhonto weSizwe operative and South African Navy's first female Rear Admiral expressed concerns over the current direction of Parliament and government's policies, and she is in studio with us now for that conversation. And I think let's start here. During the break, we were talking about South Africa having made those great strides, and I was asking if Rwanda was still our competitor when it comes to women in parliament, but we've actually regressed. Talk us through that.
Yeah, sadly, in Ntokozo, we have regressed. It's not something to celebrate. And it's not just us. The regression is found throughout the continent. A United Nations report, United Nations Women report, stated that in Africa we are going to need at least 145 years to achieve gender equity throughout our parliaments. I think it's sad, but for me it speaks to issues of equity. Like, we focus so much on equality, which is easy, it's statutory, just pass the laws, which is what we have done. But the equity, because what holds women back? Here is the study that has said in South Africa for the last 30 years, what are the challenges that women face in terms of equity? What are the working conditions, whether in the media, whether in government, whether in private sector, in mining? What are the things that hold women back, that make women not to want to get into those spaces? Because I don't think that it's a I do not want. It's the conditions that exist exclude you. But society cannot be ruled by one biological sex. Because male or female is not a gender, that's a biological sex. We can't have a domination of one sex over society. That's not how we functioned pre-colonially. So, you know, when I saw on your screen human rights activist, I smiled because that's not how I actually define myself. Human rights are to the United Nations human rights agenda, which is where gender equality comes in. It comes as if it's an external thing, European coming from the United Nations. But that's how we were pre-colonially. We never were patriarchal people. I always say to people, there are 4 types of societies pre-colonial in Africa. You had a matrilineal society, straight matriarchy we had, but we never had straight patriarchies. We had patrilineality, we had matrilineality. We had a mix of matrilineality and patrilineality, but we never were patriarchal. So where does this patriarchy come from? That's holding us back so much. I think before I give it back to you, I always highlight this. Are you aware since Ghana 1957, because they are the first to get the so-called independence, we've only produced 3 African women presidents, all of them by default, I argue. Somebody died, Joyce Banda popped up in Malawi. Magufuli was killed, and then Tanzania, the one that's on now, popped up. And then people normally say, oh, but Johnson in Liberia was a straight election. No, the men had run such a fierce and inhuman civil war where they would put AK-47s through the vaginas of women and shoot them through the head. Rape was the #1 weapon in that civil war. You had 16-year-old boys literally cutting out people's livers and eating them. They had created such a mess, they needed a woman to come and salvage the pieces and pick the whole thing up. So it's not just a South African thing, because this is an African thing, and it's a concern.
Absolutely. And now, just talking about some of the issues that you do mention that might be, you know, what hinders women from playing in the political space, assumptions would be that women would help, you know, someone coming into the space would help address those issues. Perhaps just splitting the question in 2, then what is it that makes it so difficult to really tackle these issues? You know, are men not coming on the board and working with the women, but also speaking to that balance? How do we then get to that right balance where it's not just women that are pushed to the forefront, but society as a whole, women, men, children, everybody is served and the country goes forward together? How far are we from meeting that balance?
We need to address self-hate. We need to address patriarchy. I don't think South Africans will actually pause and realize this. The Dutch had us colonized for 143 years. The British after them for 163 years. That's over 200 years. Then we had the self-imposed citizenry of Afrikaners with apartheid for 46 years. It's almost 250 years, if not slightly over, of statutory white is right, white is might. What's the reverse? It means black is wrong, black is weak. If for over 200 years it's systemic, it's structural, everything you see about blackness is demonized or bastardized, truly even a 6-year-old will tell you, you come to a point where you internalize this. And if we really want to understand the gender relations, we should then understand the racism. That's why in the world we are still fighting the ugly face of racism, not just in South Africa. It has not changed. So if you understand how race works, that's how gender works. Those over 250 years came with statutory religion that says the woman is a deceiver of men. We are the first to be deceived in the Garden of Eden, and then we deceive the men. So therefore, we carry this scourge of being the deceiver of men. Therefore, you have verses that say women can't teach men, women must learn in silence. You know, you have verses that say the man is the head of the house. It does not exist in our languages. As I say, we never had patriarchy. But we've internalized this, not just as women only, but as men too. I mean, if you look at FGM in the whole of Africa, fortunately we don't have it because Islam never made its way here. If you look at FGM, it is the grandmothers that uphold it. If you look at patriarchy, it is the mothers and the grandmothers. How do you ask as a woman, a 7-year-old child, when they do a mistake, uzoshatwa ubani? At 7, I don't even know if I'm going to grow breasts or not. Already you are asking me who's going to marry me. It's not even a mutual contract. It's somebody taking me. We've even bastardized lobola. So this thing is internalized. And I think that's why I like pillar number 1 of MK that says restoring the dignity of African people. Because we need to start there. If it's statutory and it's systemic, that brought you to the low self-esteem, that brought you to think that as an African woman, I'm a parcel and I'm nothing, or even as a black person, I'm a parcel and I'm nothing, it means it has to be a conscious, statutory, systemic program that should take you out of there. And in the last 30 years, sadly, we haven't done that. We have gone and passed the laws, as I said, equity. The statutory framework is okay, but not the equity.
The action and the
not
equity
the equity,
behind
not
that.
the conditions.
And Khanyisile, you know, our viewers, the visuals that they are seeing is, of course, of MK celebration in Vosloorus, which is about to get underway. A lot of South African homes, and I assume some of the members of MK, those households led by women who are raising both girls and boys. From the MK party's point of view, to get some of that action on the ground, beyond the policy, beyond the great, you know, legislation and so on, talk us through perhaps how the MK party is working around changing that mindset and getting more women really involved in politics and changing some of the issues that they face within their communities and making an impact as women in politics.
I think the first thing that we are currently consciously getting on a drive on is to get women. And I think, as you said, not women for the sake of getting women, because that also is what has destroyed us in the last 30 years. We need to get women in spaces where they can excel. We need to get women in spaces where their gifts talk to that space, so that you don't have a man driving the woman, so the woman is the face. So we are on a drive to get more women on board. That's one, internally for us. But two, in terms of restoring the dignity of African people, I think we need to start this campaign that says, and we are talking about it, that says the African woman matters. You know, we had Black Lives Matter. Now we need to say the African woman matters. Why does the African woman matter? It's not rhetoric. If you look at, they call, Christians say before Christ, BC. Those who are not, we say before the common era. That's not the era in which we are, because the era in which we are is AD or common era. In BCE times, it was a countdown. We had women in leadership in 11,000 BCE, coming down all the way to 1 BCE. The Kandake queens of Nubia ran a matriarchy. And a matriarchy is not an opposite of patriarchy. It did not mean, therefore, men are the parcels. You know, you'll find that if the queen was on the throne, immediately the royal council would be 70% men, to balance, so that no sex is loading it over the other. I mean, you look at the Zulu people. when they describe themselves, they don't say Sisizwe Sika Shaka. Even if it's Shaka that put them on the map, because they were smaller compared to Ondwandwe and the others. But Sisizwe Sika Mtania. Why? Mtania was a woman who must be. Why? Because Umkaba Igajama, the sister Umama and the other girl, whose name I never really get, when their mother died, she had not left an heir to take the throne. That was in patriarchy. That's patrilineality. Zulu people are patrilineal, meaning heritage is taken by the female. Umkabai rose up as a princess to take a wife for the father. First, YM Samoa Pasha, what the woman I will take will give birth to an heir. Watata umasbiya. That's why Unkosi Undaba maga responda magazalwa the boy uti Mkabai wenzenga kona. That's how Shaga's father's name is Senzanga kona. You won't do that in a patriarchal society. But today, look at how patriarchal, not even patriarchal, stratified patriarchal Zulu people are. So practically as MK, that's why we want to work with traditional authority. We need to return Ondlunkulu. From Cape to Cairo, I've been to 41 African countries. Now I actually need to put pen to paper and count. I.e., there is no pre-colonial empire, state, kingdom that functioned without a queen mother. And to even say a queen mother is an insult, because in English, a queen mother is a woman who gives birth to the queen or the king. For us, Indlovukazi, the she-elephant, was a person who kept the national altar. If things went wrong, we didn't ask the king or the queen. We went to Indlovukazi and we said, what are you hearing from our ancestors? What is wrong? We need to return that. Look at the confusion happening in the Zulu royalty right now. I always ask, Ikuphi Indlovukazi? Where are the women? Because we cannot follow colonial religion and colonial capitalism and neocolonialism and negate the role of women. Women pre-colonially ruled spirituality. They ruled the economy, they ruled agriculture, they ruled the household. All these four things speak together because it is spirituality that dictates your economic paradigm. It's spirituality that dictates your agricultural paradigm. That's why we even said only women can till the land because they are fertile. If they touch the land, they will imbue the fertility on the land. If men touch the land, if you pour semen on the ground, it will go dry. And in 2 days, you won't even see if there was semen on that ground. We refused men to till the land, not because it was oppression of women, because we understood from our spirituality. So those are the values we need to bring back. You know, including the powers we've taken so much away from traditional authority and given to municipality. Although I always put a disclaimer, and my husband laughs, and I say traditional authorities themselves need to be cleaned up. It's a process.
A lot of work needs to be done there as well.
Because remember, those that resisted colonialism would be dethroned, and an imposter would be put in charge. And through time, the imposter has become the real person. So we need a clean-up even there.
Well, Khanyisile, we are running out of time, but I think before I let you go, perhaps just your thoughts on the portfolios that women could do particularly well in if we did see more women enter the politics space. We are observing 16 days against, GBV. There's a plethora of issues, as you mentioned in your first answer, that women are still dealing with. What do you think are the portfolios that women could really, make that impact when it comes to the economy and society's development as a whole?
I don't want to draw those from my head. I think I will use the same paradigm of experience of thousands of years, because we are the first race on earth, where women excelled in the economy, women excelled in matters of spirituality, women excelled in matters of agriculture, women excelled as advisors. We were the seers. Traditionally, even Ubungoma, Izangoma were predominantly women, because our spirituality understood that because we are procreators, you can give birth. Unenimba, a word I've never found in English. There's no equivalent. Because in a nimba, you can hear from the spirit world quicker. So they put us in those places because those places make up society. If you don't have food security, you're going to end up like this 21-year-old and 17-year-old poor Mozambicans who find themselves digging gold that they don't even own, that when they surface on the earth, it's not even theirs. So agriculture is important. It ties to the economy. If you're not economically viable, you're going to end up as economic migrants throughout Africa. And absolutely, God forbid it happens to us. Yeah. Thus far, we don't have South African economic migrants. That's why, that's what forced me to join MK. I'm just like, #Gugitila. This country must come right, by hook or crook. We refuse to be refugees again for the second time. We were refugees during the struggle We are not going back there.
And women must play their
And
role.
women must play their role.
Khanyisile,
Yes.
we've run out of time, but a thought-provoking conversation that I think viewers at home, both women and men, will have some things to just simmer about when it comes to really defining what politics means for the development of the country's people. Thank you so much for that conversation. Of course, Khanyisile Litchfield-Tshabalala recently joining MK Party, who is celebrating, of course, their one-year anniversary in Vosloorus. There's more news and updates coming up right after the break. Do stay with us.